Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Bree, and today's video we're going to be talking about all the books I read in the month of February. We're in a bit of a different location, and that's just because the light is way better in here than in where I normally film, so I'm going to film it in here today. And then also, I wanted to address that I haven't uploaded quite a few videos. I think it's been about 2 or 3 weeks, and I just wanted to explain. I've just been having a hard time with my health, and also just mentally I feel like I needed a break from YouTube, so that's why I've been gone. But I'm back, hopefully with consistent uploads. We shall see. If health still is improving, then that's what will be happening, but I just wanted to let you know that's why I've been gone. Today we're gonna just talk through the books in the order that I read them, and I wanted to have more reading vlogs this month than I did. Like I said, I've been sick, so I had actually planned quite a few reading vlogs with this stuff, and then only one actually came out. So I'm a little sad because I do feel like I had a good mix of books this month to talk about, but I'm gonna go in depth and talk to you about them here. So the first book that I read was part of my trying to read more nonfiction this year, and that is Hood Feminism by Mikki Kendall. I read it on audiobook, so I have a little note here to talk to you about it. So that is a nonfiction that is basically talking about feminism, but from a more intersectional point of view. So it kind of discusses how mainstream feminism tends to just include white upper class women, and tends to leave out lower class white women and women of color, and how we can just do more to be inclusive, and really how feminism can really improve and bolster the movement by this inclusion of intersectionality. And I think that it was really good, especially if you're someone who is just newer to the idea of feminism and you want to learn more. I just feel like this offers a lot of critical points, and I think it would also be a book that is really good for conversation with others in your life, because I feel like she kind of hits the points in a way that just makes it very accessible for any kind of reader. And I really liked the audiobook when I read it too. I think that was a great way to consume it. I've really been enjoying reading nonfiction through audiobooks. I just think that on my way to work, I tend to listen and I don't have a lot going on, and so I can really focus on it, and I feel like that's really worked for me. So yeah, I would really recommend this. It was really accessible and very important and thought-provoking, and I think is something that a lot of white women should be reading along with other people. But I think for someone like myself who considers myself a feminist, it's making sure that I'm also looking at a bunch of sides of it and including people whose experiences I don't have. And so I think that this really lends itself to having the conversation we need to have of white women in feminism and the importance of inclusion of everyone if we really want to make progress and not just white progress, essentially. So yes, highly recommend. I really liked it. I've been meaning to read it for years because so many people have recommended it. So I'm really glad I got to it this month, and I think it's definitely worth the read. Next, we have one that I kind of picked up because I've been wanting to try this author, and this just sounded like a plot that was going to be for me, and that's The Hexologist by Josiah Bancroft. This is a interesting fantasy book. So it's got a lot of different fantasy elements, but at its core, it's really a mystery. And I found I really like fantasy mysteries. So this just came out last year, beginning of last year, September of 2023. So it's a kind of a newer release. And Josiah Bancroft wrote I think it's called the City of Babel series, which I've never read, but I was intimidated by because everyone says it's weird. And now after reading this, I wonder if they're similar, because I really liked the weirdness in this, so I think maybe I could like the weirdness in that series. So this is about a couple who kind of just solve mysteries, and the main woman, what's her name? Isilda, she used to work for the government but doesn't anymore, and now she works on her own and she takes cases. And one day this man comes to her from the king, and the first sentence really says it all. "The king wishes to be cooked alive," the royal secretary said, accepting the proffered saucer and cup and immediately setting both aside. At his back, the freshly stoked fire added a touch of theater to his announcement, though neither seemed to suit what until recently had been a pleasant Sunday morning. "Does he?" Isilda Wilby gazed at the royal secretary with all the warmth of a hypnotist. Yes, he's quite insistent." And so then it says a lot more, but it says, "More precisely, the king wishes to be baked into a cake." So right away I was like, this is gonna be funny. So essentially after that meeting, something happens that convinces her to take on the case. And this is just like anything. Like if you want like a bag with just like, you can reach in and find whatever you want. If you play D&D, it's called a bag of holding. If you want like the bag holding, this has that. It has, I don't want to spoil like all the different fun stuff because there is one thing that happens that I thought was just really fun I wasn't seeing coming. But there's just so many different like magical things that they can do. And I feel like if you're someone who wants a fantasy that has a lot of hard rules and is like very fleshed out, I don't think you'll get that in this because it's just kind of like anything goes. Like the magic system, I don't think I fully understood. It's just kind of pulls it out from wherever. Yes, there are like these factions that he talks about that you can kind of see here where it's like, it's hard to see, but there's like 4 groups and then they have like their own sectors of magic. And so yes, there's like rules on how people can use different magics and some people can use 2. Really though, I feel like it's kind of an anything goes magic system, which really worked for me. And it was really funny and just fun. But I will say like halfway through, I think some of the charm and fun of the book just dragged down a little bit. Like it's not a very long book. It's only 300 some pages, but I think it could have been like a little bit shorter just because I do think for some of it, it ended up being a little bit slower than what I prefer. So I think in the end, I would give this around like a 3.5. I will continue the series and I do think it's really fun. And I think that's the reason that it keeps me reading is I really liked our main character Isilda and her husband Warren. I loved their dynamic and I loved the banter and just fun magic in this. That I think the pace and the mystery elements of it that weren't like 100% my cup of tea or didn't work perfectly for me, I like can put aside because I just had so much fun with it. So yeah, that's the Hexologist. I would recommend if you're someone like me who likes kind of ridiculous fantasy mysteries. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. And then we have my reading vlog where I was reading fantasy romance and I read A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk. This has been on my TBR for like 2 years now and I've been wanting to get to it. It's a male-male romance that is historical. I think we're around 18 something. I'm so bad at remembering the dates of these things. Maybe it doesn't fully give the date. Anyway, the book starts off where we're following this perspective of this man who's being chased and then the story kind of cuts off and you don't know what happened to him. And then we follow our main character Robin as he is in this new position and he is a lord or something. He's something high up and his family has passed away, so now he's in charge of everything and he's trying to keep his family afloat because his parents didn't really handle their money very well, and so he is in debt and he's trying to make sure he can like keep his family afloat. And he's at this new job and in walks in Edwin, who is the other main character, and he immediately starts talking to him about magic and where this other person that he's supposed to be taking over from is, and it turns out there's a bit of a mystery with where this person went. They kind of end up having to work together to figure out what's going on. So yeah, it's a sweet romance between these 2 characters and I found I really, really liked it. I think I was really highly anticipating it and it didn't quite make the 5-star for me. It was more of a 4-star and I would continue on with the series. I didn't realize that the mystery itself like wraps up, but it also leaves open like this more of a plot, where a lot of books I read in the fantasy romance category are kind of their own plot in one and then the next book is like a completely new plot with new characters and you just see characters from the first one. But I think the next one like will continue on the plot, though I think it is following different characters. So I'm intrigued to read on and I definitely would continue. I think the only thing that stopped me from completely loving this was the little bit in the middle lagged in terms of the mystery. Like I was so intrigued with the mystery and how they were going to solve it, and I enjoyed seeing them work together and build their relationship through the mystery. And I think we just took a pause in the middle to just focus on just the romance. And that like felt a little slower for me. And then also just in terms of spice level, I prefer like 1 sex scene or less in my books. And that's just personal preference. And so for me, this was a little more spicy than I wanted. That being said, like I still would recommend it and I still enjoyed it. So yeah, that is A Marvelous Light by Freya Marsk. Next we had one of my most anticipated books of the year. If not my most anticipated. I think I would say this is my most anticipated. And that is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. It is here. And I'm so happy I had the energy to make a vlog for this one because I was just so excited to read it. And it did not disappoint. I think in the vlog I said I would give it a 4.5, but honestly, like just thinking about it, since then till now. I really feel like it's 5-star in my heart. Yes, I don't think I loved it quite as much as the first Emily Wilde, but I still love this one so much. So in the first one, we're following Emily Wilde as she's trying to write an encyclopedia of fairies, and her rival co-worker, he's like a academic rival, they get into some trouble with some fairies and they have to figure out some stuff. In this one, we are following them as they are in kind of Sweden area this time, not Sweden, Switzerland and Austria area this time, and they're trying to track down some things within Wendell's past, and they get into this whole like other mystery as well with him, and they're kind of on the run and they're kind of figuring out a mystery within this town, and I just really loved it. I think this was so cute and wholesome, and I just loved being back with the characters. It just brought a smile to my face, and I have no complaints about it. I feel like there's a lot I could say, but I think a lot of it would be spoilers if you haven't read the series, so I don't want to, but there's more dog content in here, which I appreciated and I really loved. And I also love that there were some characters from the first one that were brought back, especially some of my favorite ones were brought back, and I really appreciate that because I loved seeing them again. And so yeah, I think this is a series that truly was like made for me. It's one of my favorite probably series of all time so far. I mean, I'm only 2 books into the series, but I can safely say like this is one that I will see myself going back to over and over again, and I can see it being like one I recommend to a lot of people. So that's Emily Wilde's encyclopedia. No, that's Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. And yeah, just loved it. You can watch my vlog if you want more like in-depth reaction to it. And then I read, for that vlog, the last book was Empire of Shadows by Jacqueline Benson. This comes out, I believe, in April. It was an arc that I was sent on NetGalley, and it was my first arc that I've ever reviewed with NetGalley, so I was really excited to read it. And I had requested it because it said it was like the Mummy meets something else, and now I can't remember. But it's like with a feminist twist, and I was really intrigued because I like adventure stories like that, and I thought that it would just be fun. And I think it was in some ways, but in the end it kind of was a disappointment for me. So we're basically following 2 characters, and I don't even remember their names at this point. One of them is, she is like, it starts off with her perspective, and she is like an worker at this museum, and she really wants to go do like archaeology, but no one will let her because she's a woman. And I think we're in like the 1800s, late 1800s, like 1890s or something, maybe 1901. No, maybe we're in the 1910s. It doesn't matter. Anyway, and she wants to do that, and one day when she's being fired because she went to jail for being part of the suffragette movement protests, she went to jail and now she's out, but her boss found out, so now she's being fired. She stumbles upon this map and ends up being chased by this guy who wants the map, and she realizes that there's this like uncharted territory in Honduras that kind of is like El Dorado in nature, and so she wants to go discover it and prove herself essentially, and also because she's being chased by this guy. So she runs away, she gets there, and then she meets another guy who's working there as like a surveyor, and he's from America, she's from London, and he ends up taking her on this journey while they're being chased by this guy. And I think my main critique is that like this was supposed to feel high stakes, and I didn't feel any of that. Like they were supposed to be being chased, but never at any point did I really feel any like sense of emotion about it. And their romance between them, like the banter was okay, but I just really found myself like not connecting or caring that much with the characters and with their growing relationship. Overall, the beginning I was like, oh, this is really fun, I'm having a good time. By the end, I just felt lukewarm about everything. I felt like I didn't care really what happened by the time, and I didn't believe the like stakes that I think we were meant to believe. Like I don't believe this was supposed to be kind of a cozier fantasy. It wasn't really marketed that way, and so with that I wanted to feel more of the tension, and it just wasn't there. So unfortunately this was a bit of a disappointment, and I think I would give it about 3 stars, but I wouldn't continue with the series, and I just overall was like disappointed in it. But I would recommend it if you really like adventure stories and you like that kind of thing. If it sounds intriguing to you, like I would still give it a go. It just wasn't for me. So now we're at the point of the month where the videos declined, but my reading did not. So I picked up Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. This is something I've heard a lot about. I've been trying to find more sci-fi and get more into sci-fi, and so I found this novella at Half Price Books, and I've heard great things about Nnedi Okorafor, so I knew I wanted to try it, and I read this in one sitting. I really enjoyed it. It's only 90 pages, and it reads really quickly, and we're basically following a girl who is going to this school in space, and it's like from different galaxies, and she's the first of her people to leave and try to go to this school. She's leaving behind everything she ever knew, and she knows by leaving she can never go back to her hometown. And while she's on this ship, something goes down and she has to figure out how to survive. And it's a really great, beautiful story. It's a lot of, I think, Binti like kind of having to learn and grow up really fast because this is her first time away from home, and then she's confronted by like all these decisions. So in a lot of ways you're seeing her just have to grapple with so much and really come into herself. There is like a lot of her trying to troubleshoot, I guess. I don't want to give too much away because I think it's fun to see like where the story goes, and I really enjoyed it. I feel like for this amount of pages, for this short of a novella, I usually read novellas around the 150 page mark. For this size, I think it packs so much in, and it created such a world so quickly that I just really was impressed by it and enjoyed it, and I could see myself finishing this series and seeing myself enjoy a sci-fi like this. I think the only thing I will say, and why it's not a 5-star and why it's a 4.5, is I think that's a lot of things like went over my head in terms of the world building and the connections. I think that I could really grasp it more upon reread. I think just the way it was written kind of made it hard for me to fully grasp, and so I didn't fully like dive into it and feel sucked in and into the world. So I think upon reread it would be a 5-star, but right now I'm giving it about a 4.5. But if you like sci-fi and you haven't read this, I think it's a great one, and it's short and just like really packs a punch. So that's Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. So next I read Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This was one that I had read Tread of Angels by Rebecca Roanhorse and really liked it. That one was like a fantasy mystery, and this is very different. They call it an epic fantasy, I think, on here, but it's historical as well. It's like inspired by pre-Columbian lore and things like that, and so we're following many different perspectives in here. It's really hard for me to like say what this is about. We're following kind of a figure who's like prophesized to be the next like hero or god type person. We're following his perspective, and the book actually kicks off with him and his mother is doing some stuff to him to finish like a ritual almost for him, and then she leaves and it's the aftermath of like what happened then. And then we're following another main character who is essentially a like captain of a ship, and she kind of gets forced to bring him somewhere, and she's paid really handsomely for it. And then we're following another person who is the sun temple goddess, is that what you call it? Sun priest. She's the sun priest, and she is starting to deal with some seeds of unrest in her community, and she's trying to navigate that, and she's kind of an outsider in this community as well. So she got to the rank of sun priest, but she kind of had to do a lot to get there, and she's constantly reminded that she's an outsider. And so we're watching like these people as these different things shift within the story, and you can tell there's like something bigger brewing, like maybe a bigger war and politics. A lot of politics are happening. This I gave a 4-star as well. It's similar to Binti, where I just feel like there was so much I didn't grasp. This epic fantasy style has never really been my style, but I really liked her writing in Tread of Angels that I really want to try it in here. And I will say the writing is so good, and I do think that the characters are interesting and intriguing, and there were certain people that I could follow, and I was really interested to see where their storyline went. But there was a lot of the book that I think I spent just a little bit bored because we just have so much that we have to learn and get through, and that's always kind of been my main complaint about epic fantasies, is that they feel too long for me, and sometimes filled with like these moments that I just don't see their importance. And it's hard because I feel like I really enjoy a book where I love the characters and plot can go really nowhere, and I can still really enjoy it and recommend it. But for some reason in certain epic fantasies, I think that we focus more on like the world building and moments like that sometimes I get like lost in that a little bit. And so I feel like that was maybe the case here, where we had all these moments of like spending on just politics and like I knew that there was conversations happening that were maneuvering certain things within the politics in the world, and that just wasn't as intriguing as learning about the characters and their backstory and figuring out where the plot was going to go. That was what really drew me in. So I did like it. I would give it a 4-star, and I will continue. I already have favorites on my TBR because I do think, like, overall, in terms of epic fantasy, this is one that I did really enjoy. It's just not, I think, going to be a favorite for me because of those factors. So yeah, that's Black Sun. I would recommend it if you are someone who really likes epic fantasy. I feel like this could really work for you because I feel like the reasonings that I don't like it, I know my husband who really likes epic fantasy would probably really enjoy it because of those elements. So I think that if you're someone who does like it, you could enjoy this more than me. But that's Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. Then I read The Center because I've seen a couple people, I know Kayla from Books and Lala read it and really loved it. I think Bethany, Beautifully Bookish Bethany, read it and she really loved it. I think both of them gave it 5 stars. And I, for me, would say it's more of a 3.5, but I was super intrigued and wanted to try it. A lot of people have said, like, if you liked Babel or you didn't like Babel and you wanted something more shorter to read this, and I see the comparison. So our main character, she's from Pakistan, and she speaks Urdu, and so her boyfriend just one day, like, goes and he just comes back and he can speak perfect Urdu, like, even better than her, and so she is like, what the heck is going on? And she eventually learns about this place called The Center, and it's about her going there and learning about what's really going on at the center and how they're able to just give you language, essentially, how you can go for like a couple weeks and just come back knowing fully this language. And I feel like that was so interesting. And for the Babel comparison, I think that if you didn't like Babel because you felt like it was too long and the fantasy you didn't really enjoy, or you're not really a big fantasy reader and so you don't want that and you want something a little quicker, I guess that goes with the long, and you want something more literary fiction, I feel like this is more literary fiction leaning. And I would say it's like literary fiction horror, but mainly literary fiction with like a sprinkle of horror at the end. And for me, I'm just not a huge literary fiction reader. And for this, I found myself, well, I enjoyed it. I listened to it mostly on audiobook with some reading. And while I think that it worked really well as an audiobook, I just think that for me, there's just something with literary fiction that just like I didn't get fully sucked into. A lot of it follows at the beginning her life and her backstory and how she met her boyfriend and their like situation and her friendships and stuff, that the interesting parts of The Center that I wanted to learn about didn't come until later. And I just found myself a little bit bored waiting to get there. I enjoyed learning about her, and I do think that she's an intriguing main character. I think that she has a lot of sides to her. She's not entirely a likable main character in certain aspects. Like, she definitely makes mistakes, but I enjoyed that about her. But I think I just was a little bit bored with certain ways it got to that. And I think that I wish like the horror elements were a little bit bigger. Like, we got a glimpse of it at the end, but I just wanted it to go a little more there. There's just definitely content warnings you should look up in here as well. But overall, I gave it, I think, a 3.5. I think the conversations about language and privilege and culture and all these things like were so interesting. And I think it did that well. I just think that the literary fiction elements and like what it chose to focus on at certain points just weren't my thing. I think it meandered a little bit. And then also, I wish the horror elements at the end had been like a little bit more ramped up. So yeah, I'm glad I tried it. I just think literary horror isn't necessarily my thing. But if that sounds like your thing, definitely give it a go. Next, I read The Dead Cattails Assassins by P. Djeli Clark, and this was an anticipated release for me. I'm so happy NetGalley and Tor approved me for the ARC. I believe it comes out also in April, but I will have to put the date up here in case I'm wrong. And this is a novella. I think P. Djeli Clark really does novellas really, really well. So if you didn't love A Master of Jinn and you wanted it a bit shorter, I think that this one might work for you a little bit better. We're basically following a woman who is undead, and she is an assassin. And basically there's a couple rules for assassins. They just have a job that they're given and they have to follow it through. And they have only 24 hours to complete it. And basically there's a couple other rules, but basically she finds herself in a situation where she's confronted with something. She has no memories of her past. She's confronted with something that prevents her from completing her assignment, and then is going on a whole adventure through the 24 hours of the night to try to figure out what to do and how to remedy this situation. I don't want to give away the story because I really feel like the way it goes is so interesting and better left to just like find out for yourself. But the way it goes in a direction I just really didn't see coming. It was so interesting to me and I really, really liked it. I think overall I'll give it a 4-star. It didn't like completely blow me away, but I think for what it was so fun. I would highly recommend it. I think it's just like a really fast-paced, fun thing. And I think the way that PJ LeClerc world builds is really interesting too. Like I really like kind of like steampunk elements. Like there's just so much in his worlds. Like you can't really pin it down to one thing. And I think that's so fun. But I instantly felt dropped into the world. And I think that's something he does really strongly as well, is like just instantly feeling like I'm in this scene, in this world with this character. And I really enjoyed the character. I will say there's one, and I know I'm reading an art copy, so they might cut some stuff out, but there's like one line that the main character just kept saying, and I think that was a little overused, and it kind of got on me, which I think is why it's a little bit lower, is I normally don't notice those things, but the amount it was used just kind of made me like notice it, and I just didn't love that aspect. So that's just like a minor thing, but overall really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars, and I would recommend if you are interested in that kind of story. Then we have a T. Kingfisher book. This is Clockwork Boys by T. Kingfisher. This is the first book in the Clock War duology. I think it's only 2 books, and I decided to start with this one first because I have this one and Paladins something, but I think that they're in a connected series, and I just felt like this one was the one I was supposed to start with, so I did. And we're basically following a forger, and it starts the book where she's looking for someone in the jail to take with her on this mission, and she ends up finding a paladin who was possessed, and now he doesn't have, the demon's still like kind of there, but it's like dying, so he like occasionally says like demonic words, but he's no longer possessed, and he's done a lot of horrific crimes when he was possessed, so he's in jail. So she decides to use him because she has like this weird like power that kind of, when she smells rosemary, that like makes her sneeze and stuff, and that tells her like that she's on the right track. So she gets him, and then she has an assassin. So essentially there's these things called Clockwork Boys, and the side that they're on doesn't know like how to fight them, and so they're being sent basically into the war zone to try to figure out the secret of these Clockwork Boys and how to destroy them. And they've sent in groups a lot, and no one's come back with any information. In fact, most of them have come back dead. I think all of them really have come back dead. So they're like, just like, we know we're gonna die, and they've kind of chose just criminals to do this because they're like, your life doesn't mean anything to us, so you go do this mission. So we're following the perspective of the forger, and she and I think the paladin start to have a romance, and it's just in the very T. Kingfisher style. It's kind of in the Sword Heart world as well, and I really enjoyed this one. I think I would give it a 3.5. It was fun, and I enjoyed listening to the audiobook when I did, and I would continue on and finish the series, and I just enjoyed T. Kingfisher's writing and the character building, but I think overall the plot itself just didn't grip me quite as much. I think the length, I think almost she maybe could have combined this one and the other one into one book instead of splitting it into 2, because I feel like by the time we get to the end, there's really no plot. Like, it's a lot of build up, and then I think in the next book we're going to get the plot and what is really going to go down, where like this just was like a lot of setup, and I think that's what kind of, in the end, I just didn't like it quite as much. I think if we had gotten a full resolution of a plot, or at least a stopping point that didn't feel like we're stopping midway through a story, I would have liked it more. But that being said, it's still T. Kingfisher. Still enjoy her writing and her characters. So overall, 3.5 from me. Then we have the last book. And my thing's dying. Okay, I'm going to change it because I really am excited about this book. Hopefully this is better. Sorry if it looks a little different. The lighting's being weird now, and then also I had to get the new battery. But this is the last book, and it's my favorite book. I think it's going to be a favorite of the year. This is like one that I've had and I've been weary about because I read the author before, and I ended up DNFing it because it just wasn't for me. I loved the writing and the plot was interesting, but the content wasn't for me. But I looked up trigger warnings and I felt like this one was going to be better. So that's House of Hunker by Alexis Henderson, and oh my gosh, I loved this book. This is a 5-star. This is definitely a favorite of the year. I really wish I had vlogged this because my reaction to it, I just would have loved to have that on video. And yeah, absolutely think this is a horror for me. In a lot of ways, though I don't think everyone would agree with this comparison, it reminded me of Mexican Gothic. Not from the content necessarily, but from the way The story kind of starts out like a little slower, and you feel like a tension and like an eeriness, but there's not like a ton of like horror right away, and then just like kind of slowly ramps up until it's like full speed. And I think that really reminds me of reading Mexican Gothic. So in this, we're following Marion, and she is on the streets in this town in the south, and she sees this sign for blood maidens. In the north, blood maidens are a thing, and they basically are for like the nobles to pay them to have their blood, and then they get them for like, we'll say 5-10 years, and then at that point they pay them a pension and they give them a house, and they're kind of set for life. So it's appealing to people like her who want a better life for themselves, and they think, okay, I'll do those 10 years and then I'll get out and I'll not have to worry for the rest of my life. And she's really in a bad situation with her brother. Her family's passed except for her brother, and she's just really wanting to get out. So she goes to this meeting and tries to become a blood maiden, and then she is sent to the house of Hunker. And while she's there, things just start getting weird. She's in this house with 5 other girls, and there's a lot of like tension between them. They want to be friends, but then there's things keeping them apart, because you just start to see like this growing obsession with Elizabeth, who is the countess of the house, and how all the girls will just like do anything to be her number one. And we see Marion as she's trying to navigate the politics of this, and also her growing infatuation with Elizabeth. There's a female-female romance in here as well, and that is a main part of the story, but I feel like it's really like a look at obsession, I think, and kind of unhealthy dynamics in relationships, and how you would like do anything for someone. That kind of like intoxicating, toxic relationships. I think it's really exploring that. It just really gets cranked up towards the end, and my heart was racing. I had to know what would happen, and I loved it. I have no critiques of the story. It's just one that I think will go down as a favorite horror and a favorite book of the year for sure. I think Marion as a character was really great to follow. I liked seeing her having to navigate this world, and the tension that was there, and the like this sinisterness of it. The atmosphere in this book was so great, and you know I love a good atmosphere if you've been around for a while. So I think that this one had all of the elements I just love. It had atmosphere, it had good character work, and it had a slow building like Gothic plot where I felt just tense the entire time, and I had to know what was going to happen. So that is House of Hunker. So happy I read it, and highly recommend if you haven't read it. I know I'm a little late to the party. It released in 2022. Let's see. Yeah, 2022. So like I'm late to the party, and I know that people have been singing its praises, but in case you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend. So there you go. There are the books I read in the month of February. I appreciate you watching, and I hope that you're having a good March and that your February was good as well. And yeah, I will see you next time.